we had to futz with that a little bit. How much did we really want to show them being annoyed? And we were pretty careful about it. And ultimately, we've done an additional voiceover. Julia's voice is going to come out. Anna came in and did another voiceover because it's not very good yet. And I cannot tell you the number of times we recut that, revoiced it, and just to be able to try to explain what the heck they were doing, because it was, it's very hard to year-olds, what is this math they're doing? How are they coming up with these answers? And I don't know that we were successful, but I think that's what it's going to be. And some people will understand it, and some won't. But that is Fetch with Ruff Ruffman. And you guys were a really good audience. So thank you for laughing in all the right places. Do you have questions? I'm not sure about time-wise. I do. Okay. Well, why don't I start with questions and then go back in?
So in this, so the notion of distance and the rhythm of the universe is really nice. But why not things like, it gets darker as you get farther out, or there would have been a lot of little spaces to add the layers of darkness, coldness, what distance really means, side. You know what I mean? A lot seemed to be focused on this process,
right?
On decoding a puzzle, or on can we really get there? There's enormous. If I think of the ratio of time in the gain part of it as opposed to the science transfer part, it seems, I don't want to say thin because the principles are pretty profound one, but it just seems like there was a lot of opportunity in advance about what does it mean to be so far away from the sun?
Right. Well, I would have to agree with you that I do think it's thin. I think that this was the first show we did. We sent our team out. We had created this challenge. This was probably June 5th, and we were just learning how to do it. And I don't think we knew what we were going to get, and until we got it, I would have to say that we are still trying to figure out how to present science on television in a way that's meaningful and that you get the maximum amount of, learning. And in fact, the process, we don't have an adult who's going to talk about, what it means to be 93 million miles away or 2 billion miles away. So, and the kids don't know that information. And this is a process-oriented show, and one in which most of our shows in which we do have science, we have an expert there, and the expert is teaching the kids. In this particular show, we did not have that, and we looked for opportunities to put science content in. Poor Anna, she wants to talk about life on Mars, and they're like, yeah, whatever, let's go. The kids were not into it. And, we were at that moment trying to produce a reality show. And, literally, our cameramen by the end of the summer said they were on the Fetch diet because, the crew had to chase the kids. And, we got better at it as we went. And I would say this is not our crowning moment for science content. However, we learned a lot from it. I feel our advisors have seen it, and our advisors said, yeah, it would have been great if you had done this. And we fully agree, and I think we'll get better at it. But I recognize, your concerns about it.
Let me just ask it another way, because we have similar endeavors in a way. The Media Literacy Project. Do you work with, in the process part, do you work with educational consultants? Is that something that you sort of plot out the data points that need to be there in advance, or you just kind of do it and then?
No, normally, I would say that normally we have approved scripts in advance, but you are looking at a timeline that was so compressed in terms of doing production and getting this thing shot that because we can only shoot with the children when they're out of school. And so if you figure March 13th was when we found out we had a show, and we didn't know what it was, and we shot on June 5th. We had to find the kids, and we had to figure out, so we were on a very compressed timetable. So we had advisors who were working with us, but we're not there yet. I feel like we have a lot farther to go in terms of figuring out how to do the best, teach science in the most in the best way, and I don't think that this show profiles it. I think if you watched the ballroom dancing and what we call ballroom dancing and dog breath, but that's where Ruff has halitosis, and they're trying to evaluate the cleanliness of dogs' mouths versus human mouths. I think we we go farther with that. But partly it's trying to figure out what is the story? How do we create entertaining TV as well as making it educational? And I think we're on this line of trying to find the balance and trying to make it fun for the audience, trying to really make it feel like what the kids are watching out there, but at the same time get the science content in. I mean, if we did it like Bill Nye the Science Guy. Now, do you all know Bill Nye the Science Guy? I mean, Bill was, his show gave you so much science. And I even as an adult sitting there watching it, it was very fast, it was very funny, it was very entertaining. I would actually walk away and, what was that? I actually didn't learn that much watching Bill Nye because it was so fast and it was so much information jammed. And we are trying to not do that. We don't want to do that. We want kids to be able to come away from a show and be thinking about process and rather than just trying to learn facts really quickly and concepts that they're not going to get anyway. So, we are working with our advisors right now for developing content for next season and approaches for next season. And, how do you make a challenge? What kind of challenge do you make? Do you create? Do you produce that's both visually something you can see, something that will tell a story, something that's really exciting for the audience to watch, and something that delivers on the science, on our science mandate. So it's a really difficult process, and one that we just I think we will continue to try to work hard at.
There seems to be a lot of emphasis on collaborative problem solving in this, as opposed to individual competition. I'm wondering when you're thinking about that.
Well, the individual competition is there ultimately in the fact that one of these kids wins. But we wanted to acknowledge that competition exists in the world. We all know that there is competition out there, but we did not want to focus. I mean, every reality show is based on competition, elimination, get the most, win the most. We wanted to take it out of the realm of winning a prize, doing your darndest to get the best, to get the prize. As you see, he didn't know what the prize is. He never knows what the prize is. He figures it out in the last show. And so the kids were never very focused on the prize. We didn't want to stay focused on the prize. We wanted to stay focused on the process. So they were totally into their prize at the end of the day, because we would have a daily prize as well as a series prize. And the daily prize, they would have the option of either taking, because it wasn't always a good prize. Sometimes it was, it's like, let's make a deal. You could get the jalopy or you could get the Jaguar. That's what our prizes were. So they would have to make that decision, but as to what they wanted to take. But we really, we were so interested in the process that we as producers did not focus on the competition. Sometimes we thought we should have more, but I'll tell you an example, actually. There was one show in which the kids go to Plymouth Plantation and they're learning about technologies, and the comparison we were trying to make for the audience is that there was technology in 1627. It's not our technology, it was the technology of the day. And so there was some comparing of technologies between 2005 or 6 and 1627. And at one point, and we had to make a game out of it. It was this is a reality game show. So at one point the kids had to find something, and in order to shoot it, we would have to stop them, because if you just let the kids go, they would just run, and you would just, you'd have your cameraman running behind them. All you'd have is backs, and that's all you'd get. And in fact, we had taken over Plymouth Plantation with all of the actors who recreate the various roles in the plantation. Nobody was there. We were there after hours, and so the kids had to go and talk to the various people who lived on the plantation to get information. And so I was directing, and I made them stop. I said, when you get there, you have to wait till we catch up to you, and then we're going to turn around and you have to wait. They were so angry at me. No, because that team, they're going faster than we are, and they got really angry about it. And we had to make this is where the how much could we intervene in the actual process. We were not sure. We did not want to show conflict if there was no resolution. That we were so not interested in exploiting the conflict between the kids. Which is what reality shows do. They just find those the worst moments between human beings and human nature, and really just make that the centerpiece of their story. And we did not want to do that. But sometimes kids are kids, and unless we were as adults to go in and mediate a problem and be, producers mediating a problem, we stayed away from that. Obviously, we can't go in there and say, okay, you teams, 2 teams need to talk to each other because no one's getting an advantage here, and whatever else we might have said to them. But we chose not to do that, and to that end, we then also chose not to go much with the conflict that was happening because we didn't have a mechanism in our show format and our style and our approach in order to deal with it. And for next year, I'm not sure what we're going to do with it. I think that we need to do some more training with the kids to talk to them about how to deal with conflict, but you don't want to contaminate the process too much with lots of training, and same with science. With Zoom, we used to do very extensive science training with the kids in advance. We had a science teacher on the set. We do have a science advisor out in the field with the kids when they're shooting, so that we can at least make sure we're getting as close to correct as we can in terms of our approach. But we are trying also to get their very natural performance. And I don't know whether you all felt that what you saw was pretty natural. To my mind, I know what it was. When they got Cambridge, when Khalil grabbed the card and says, I know what it is, it's Cambridge Public Library, they were getting the answers to the clues that fast, and we were barely keeping up with them. But in general, we tried not to intervene, although we started to intervene more as the series went on because we were missing stuff. And we were missing science, and then that's where we would really get in there and say, okay, you know what, we need you to do this over again. And I felt like those are compromises we had to make, and we had to make them because we needed to get our science, but I hated doing it from just from the pure wanting to get as natural and authentic a reaction from the kids and their process. So it's a tricky walk for us, and we're still, it's something we continue to try to do a better job at, but clearly we need a lot of work in that area.
I have a question about the format of the challenges, sort of as they go on during the season. Like, I noticed that, there's the kids out in the field, and there's the kids inside, and, the kids inside had a maximum of, 40 points they could get versus the kids outside. Did you do, some balancing of that? So, there wasn't some kid who was, far and away the winner before the last episode? Is it sort of a...
Well, we try to address that. Obviously, it's not clearly enough addressed. There's a point at the beginning, I don't know, with animation where you see the scales and the heads. Don't worry, you're all going to get equal chances to go out. We needed a computer. Dear God, we needed a computer. We had these 6 kids, and we had these shoots that we had to balance because in terms of shooting days, we had to. It was just logistics. It was pure logistics that we finally, in order to solve this problem, we had to cut out, we had to make photocopies and cut out little heads of the kids and stick them on the board, and we'd had our 40 challenges, and we knew which kids were on each challenge, but which challenge was in which show, and you couldn't have the same kid in 2 different challenges in one show, and they all had to have the same opportunity. So ultimately they all did have the same number of challenges across, so they had equal number of times in which they were back at home base taking the halftime quiz show. And we had to do the halftime quiz show because logistically we could not have all 6 kids on challenges in every show. Given the amount of time we had to shoot, it was not possible to do. We tried, but we could not do it. And sometimes when I think about our upcoming season, I think, oh my God, the idea of facing those little heads again and counting 1, 2, 3, literally it was so low tech, our approach to how to do this. And I kept thinking there must be a computer program for this. I don't know what it is, but there must be one. And luckily I had an associate producer who had a computer brain, and she would just look at it all and go, no, it's okay, don't worry about it. It's all even, it's all fair, don't worry. But it was pretty tricky to do.
What was the grand prize that he came up with during the last episode?
I can't tell. That would be like telling who won Project Runway or America's Next Top Model. I can't say who won. It's... It is. I will say one thing. It is not anything that could be. It is not a material thing, and what we struggled very hard with this. Yeah. We did not want to go. Good job, kids. See ya. I will tell you what the process was, but I won't say what the prize was, and I won't say what the winner was. I'm sorry. No, Brian did not win. I said it was Brian?
You just said we didn't
Oh no! Oh no! Okay, one more here. But we decided we did not want it to be, first of all, we had no budget for a prize. It's okay, that's a starting point. No budget. We have all these rules on PBS about, about featuring any products of any kind. I mean, I cannot tell you the nightmare we've had with our lawyers about this show, but they seem to be settling down about it. Because when you're in the real world, you can't avoid the Bank of America things in the background and the Royal Sonesta sign, et cetera. But we decided that we wanted it to be experiential. We wanted it to be an experience that a kid could not normally have or easily have. And so we then sort of thought about what we could achieve, and partly through just our own personal connections. Somebody on the staff is Aerosmith's tour manager. I mean, literally, we're going through just personal things. And so I actually literally sat down with each kid and said, I want you to tell me if you could have a prize. And it's not a thing. We're not going to buy you a computer. We're not going to give you a trip to Disneyland. We're not going to give you $1 million or a college education. But if you could have something, what, it's an experience, like throw the first pitch at a Red Sox game, or, something that a kid, go backstage at an Aerosmith concert, anything, a guitar lesson with Joe Perry. And we actually had kids who were interested in these kinds of things. What would you pick? And so I worked with them and narrowed them down, and I would say, now, we're never going to be able to pull this off. Sorry, you just can't do this. So, they were actors. They were working for us. The kids are paid, by the way. They are actors. I mean, they have to join the union, but they are not actors, but they are paid as actors. So it's not a real reality game show, because in those shows, people aren't paid. But so we came up with a list, and I asked the kids to narrow it down to one each, and then in the final show, Ruff basically says, this is top secret, you're all sworn, if it comes out, if it's in the public, on the web, it came out of this room, basically Ruff says to the kids, you are, what do I know? I'm a dog. What do I know about what kids really want? What I want you to do is write down, if you could pick your own grand prize, what would it be? And so literally the kids sat down on camera and they pulled out of the mailbox, which you saw, 6 different envelopes. Each kid wrote their request in. The audience did not know what it is. And they stuck it back in, and then it goes. We didn't see it here, but we actually have times where the mailbox goes in and then pops up in the animated world, and he pulls out whatever it is that they put into the mailbox, whether it's a doggy bag or, some perfume or honey or whatever it happened to be. And so ultimately the winner, as soon as the winner won, the mailbox popped back out, and she read, oh shit! Oh, no! This is really terrible! Oh God! Okay, it read what its prize was, and it was an experience. So they read. What was that? It's somewhere. We start May 29th. It's somewhere in June, 2nd or 3rd week in June. You're just. We really are hoping that there will be a whole sort of multi-level audience for this. That on college campuses, people will be tuning into Fetch with Ruff Ruffman.
I just want to be sure I understood. You said that the halftime quiz thing was more or less for logistical and statistical.
Yes.
Because it struck me pedagogically, it's really interesting, a sort of moment to reinforce and to hear again.
Yes, and that was a choice of ours. What can we do with this?
That was sort of after the pushed, cornered by logistics.
Cornered by logistics and cornered by not really knowing what the heck the show was about. I think we probably made the decision about the halftime quiz show maybe a couple of days before we shot. I can't say enough how short, a normal show is in production in pre-production from concept through, beginning stages of shooting, often for years, and we're talking about 3 months. So, a lot of decisions that we made, and a lot of, I think a lot of this to my mind, was a bit of a happy accident. You know, we ended up at the end, we were rough men. We were, you know, in some ways, what we were trying to do on such a short turnaround, tight budget, was what Ruff was doing. He didn't, you know, it's like, well, and in fact, I have to tell you, that very first show, which you saw, the solar system show, we didn't know, that was not planned, that the stopwatch broke or that the GPS did not work. That was not part of the plan. Every time things went wrong, we had to figure out what to do. In a regular production, the stopwatch breaks, some PA runs down to Radio Shack and gets a new stopwatch. Well, our producers, I was not there. This was, I claim absolutely not 1 ounce of ownership of this, just looked at each other and said, blame it on Ruff. And so we just said to the kids, talk to Ruff about it. I mean, literally, just talk to Ruff. And we had established that the kids could communicate to Ruff. We did know that. We had this talk back thing established. So they held it up and said, you know, Khalil holds it. I said, what's up? It's broken. You know, what are we supposed to do? And ultimately, that was a happy accident. And I think our show was a series of those, and which says to me, heck, don't spend a lot of time. Let's go do it. Use your instincts. Yes?
How does the web work with the show?
The web actually is not show-based. When I worked on Zoom, the content on the web was 100% connected to the content on the show. So if you saw a recipe on the show, the recipe was on the web. In this case, the website is comprised of science-based games, which are called Science Heavy and Science Light, because of budgetary reasons, we need to make it gamey. We need to make it fun. We need to make it have some relationship to the show itself. But there's also a section on the web and the web is not done yet, and I'm not the web producer, and so I'm not going to answer these questions very well. But there's a section for getting to know who the kids are, because and we know the audience is always going to be interested in the kids. And we do give out a lot of funny little, we call them factoids about the kids, you know, that Brian thinks he has 1 million freckles on his face. And they're always said at the beginning of the show when the kids are introduced. There's always some funny little thing that Anna has 6 pet chickens, or once a moth flew into her mouth, or these just silly little things, but we think that kids will find entertaining. So all that stuff will be on the web as well. And there are science activities that are developed that are part of our outreach effort, that are taken to after-school programs, boys and girls clubs, and a training manual for people who run these programs, so that some of the activities, there's a kite flying, making and designing your own kite, there's making your own ice cream and designing a flavor. One of our challenges, actually, and it was a science challenge, was to invent a flavor of ice cream, and the constraints are the title of it has to be BLT, ice cream, and 2 of the 3 ingredients have to be vegetables. And then you have to bring it to the public. And so they had to develop the ice cream, they had to make it, they had to try different types of vegetables. Ultimately, they tested it, and they had to create a ranking system and create a grade for it. And then Ruff called them and said, now change the name. You're not doing well enough, change the name. So they changed the name and then did their data collection all over again to see what happened. And it was pretty interesting. I mean, they did much. They changed it from BLT ice cream to summer citrus quencher, I think. And they got their points, their rankings up from doing that. So it was pretty entertaining. Yes.
Yeah, so conversely, are you worried that with too much planning you're going to lose the spontaneity?
I do worry about that, yeah. Already we sit down and say, you know, we really need to make this easier. This is one of the processes that we did in terms of how the show is produced is we initially would shoot the pre-game show, which was the giving of the challenges. This is my master plan. Then in the middle of the week, we'd go out and shoot all the challenges for maybe 2 or 3 shows, and then we would shoot all the post-game shows. My idea was I wanted the kids not to know where they were going. When they were assigned the challenges, I really didn't want them to know what they were getting into. And when they got their points, I really wanted it still to be quite fresh, so that conceivably we could have done all the pre and post shows at the end of the season, and which is what we really are going to do now. But the idea was we tried to keep it as real as possible for the kids. And the first thing we did this season is we're planning next season is, well, we can't do that again. That was crazy. Because then what happens is Nah, actually, I'm going on to another thought. Never mind. But that is I worry about that, and I worry we're trying to not let the second season cast see any of the first shows. That's the other thing. I feel like if you let your cast see the show, see what's come before them, they're in certain ways going to model themselves after that first cast, which is a problem we always had in Zoom. So we're trying to decide whether we can ban them from watching it on the air when we shoot this summer, because it will go on before we actually start shooting. But I really want the freshness of, and this is our last kind of virgin cast, as I can call them, because from this point on, we won't be able to keep them away from it anymore. Yeah.
Is there a special reason you decided to go with the same cast for the entire season as opposed to have different kids?
Yeah.
That the show
The first and foremost reason is that we wanted the audience to develop a relationship with the cast. We wanted them to, identify with a cast member. If you have cast members changing in every show, or even frequently, they become meaningless to you. They're not people to you. They're just, oh, there goes another one. So we really wanted the kids to identify. There are very different kinds of looks and personalities and approaches that all these kids bring, and we feel that an audience member is going to identify much more with a kid that they're seeing every week, and they're going to like them. They're going to they want to root for them. So that was the first reason. But this, in addition, there would be logistical issues. I would be constantly in casting mode. I'd be constantly in training mode. It just would not work for us. And we were really using a model that's already been established with Survivor and some of the other shows. Actually, I don't watch them all. I know of Survivor, but so that was the reason. And I don't regret it for an instant, and I wouldn't do it any differently. But now I have to choose cast number 2, which is tricky. I'm going to sit down. Is that it, you guys? Tired. We're now in the process of choosing cast number 2, and what we're finding is, is you haven't seen Brian. Brian, as it turns out, Brian is probably the most memorable cast member. Every time we've shown this, kids remember Brian more than anyone. He's the redhead. And you really didn't see much of him this time, but he was a very colorful character. And Julia, who is the girl who turned to Ruff and said, I'm not very happy with your electronics, Ruff. She had the drollest, driest sense of humor, and you could just, and very, very smart. All of these kids were pretty smart. You could always count on Julia to say something incredibly entertaining for us as adults. I don't know what kids are going to think about it. I just don't know how they're going to feel about it. We know that they like the action. We know that they like the kids. We know that they don't laugh at Ruff's verbal humor at all. Stuff that you were laughing at, kids don't laugh at all. But if Ruff trips and falls or pulls on his ears, things that I think, oh, that's kind of hokey. And we really worked very hard not to make it hokey, not to make it too sweet, really just to edge it up a little bit in terms of all aspects of production. And I think that but kids really find it. The little ones just are hysterical on the floor if he, drops something, or if he falls. I mean, it's really great when he falls. You can see them. So it operates on very different levels, depending on who the audience is. Yes.
I'm curious about the presence of gross out humor, just in terms of it being a kid show. If it emerges at some point, or if it's something you wanted to sort of steer away from.
We don't encourage it. If it happens organically, we make a decision as to let it go, like the booger sucker thing. And
Challenges, there's not like the gross out challenge or anything.
no, we did a little bit of that. But the kids, one of the challenges is Ruff assigned the kids to, they had to cook for a crowd. That was what their assignment was. And we basically blindfolded them and took them into the kitchen of what appeared to be a restaurant kitchen, and the chef walked in, gave them their aprons, and said, "Okay, it's time to start helping me cook." And she brought out a tray full of mealworms. So they were at the zoo, and their job was to help the zoo chef prepare the diets for the various animals. In the process, they not only learned about the habitat and diets of various animals, they learned about that some animals are carnivores, herbivores, omnivores, and then they had to go through the zoo and they had the recipes, And depending on what the characteristics were of the animal, they had to figure out which diet belonged to which animal. So in that one, we had frozen dead mice, which were, Noah was totally into the frozen dead mice. And, and they went into this big freezer, and they're little blocky things. They're really horrible little square things when they come out. And he would hold it up to the camera, and Ruff was completely repulsed by the mice, completely. And he would just, oh, get it away, get it away, get it away. And that's the kind of thing, actually, that we were, to me, if we did anything that was kind of groundbreaking, that was it, because we have this animated character that's really, really talking to these kids. He's saying, Noah, put that down. No, he's saying this kid's name, and get that away from the camera. But and there were mealworms in that episode, and so we had a little bit, but we don't. Noah wanted ultimately, he asked if he could eat the mealworms, and they told us. The zoo people said he could, but we wouldn't let him because you have to worry about what you're modeling for the audience, because you don't want kids to. I was even worried. We went to Drumlin Farm and did an episode where the kids had to harvest they had to make a meal for Ruff, and they had to take whatever they could find on the farm. So they ended up going, getting eggs, milking the cows, taking stuff out of the garden. But they ate a couple of nasturtium blossoms, which are edible. But it worries me that we modeled, a kid eating a flower when, a 6-year-old could just walk into the garden and pop a flower in their mouth, that really should not be eaten. So, we have to watch out for that, because it's just, we can't do that. It's difficult.
It's kind of a two-part question. One, it seemed like Zoom was for a little bit of an older audience, and is this a deliberate decision to kind of aim for a younger group, and if so, why?
We feel like this is aiming at the same audience, if not older, actually. The kids are older. These kids are older. The kinds of things that they're doing, they're out in the those kids were out in the real world by themselves, doing things that our audience, 6, 7, 8-year-olds would not be able to do. So we didn't feel as if, but it's interesting that that it seems that way to you.
It's because 6 to 8-year-olds wouldn't be doing that kind of thing. They wouldn't have access to GPS or taking boat rides in general.
Mm-hmm.
So it seemed like, was this, kind of a fantasy thing for that age,
Mm-hmm.
exploration and knowledge gathering. And it also seemed to me that Ruff himself, had certain aspects of that age group in him too.
Mm-hmm.
When you're 6 to 8, you're always kind of screwing up and knocking things over. So I wonder if that was into the modeling of his personality much.
If that was what? I'm sorry?
Included in the modeling of his personality.
No, that was not deliberate. That there was, in fact, we actually felt like we were aiming towards an older audience, and in fact, we've had to pull so much out and not leave it in just to keep it younger than we thought it was. We thought it was getting too old, and so we worried about that. So I'd have to say no, that was not the plan anyway. I wanted to tell you a little bit about the production process, which I keep starting and then I never get to it, is that in terms of how we set it up, and Scott had asked a few minutes earlier about worrying about the spontaneity going, which is what distracted me. But in fact, what we do with the kids in the challenges, we presented the actual challenge at their home base, which is what we called it, and then they would go out and they would do their challenge, and then we would very, very quickly have to put together a string out of that challenge so that the next time we went back to shoot the post-game show, which would have been which was at the end of the week, the kids could actually watch the video, the kids left behind, and be able to answer the questions, because they had to answer those questions. In order to do that, you have to string out your story very, very quickly. So that was a very first piece of incredibly fast turnaround, to be able to shoot a story on Tuesday and then have a rough cut of it essentially by Friday. We're not news. We felt like we were a news operation, and it was a pretty tough turnaround. But then we would go back into the edit room and recut a real rough cut. And at that point, we would then bring Jim Conroy in, our actor, and we'd put him in a booth, and we'd put on a video, and he would just improv and riff all the way through. So if it happened that the kids talked to him, he'd just talk right back. And so it happened real time. So when he was saying, "Oh no, what am I going to do? Anna's not wearing a GPS on her wrist," and those things were all just our actor just off the cuff making those comments. And then we would go back to the edit room, place all of that, and pull out probably 2/3 of it, because the stuff he would say was like, oh, we can't leave that in. And there are a lot of times we'd say, that's just not okay. It's, and sometimes it was the kids, sometimes it was Jim, sometimes, one of us would say, well, kids aren't going to understand that, and the other one would say, well, who cares? Adults will understand it. It's not going to ruin the experience for kids. It will just make us more accessible to a larger audience. So there are a lot of those conversations, a lot of, is it okay? I mean, the whole big I cannot tell you the arguments about Cat Stevens. It was just ridiculous. And the other one that we spent a lot of time on was, and I'm still not sure. There's some that I'm still not sure about. We say them. Oh, I know. There's one episode called Funny Boat Race in which the kids had to design a boat out of junk that they found at a dump. And they had a kid expert, a boy who his father was an engineer, and he very much had an engineering head. And he had participated in this, large-scale called Funny Boat Race. I think it's in Marblehead. And he, at one point, he would help the kids, and his father would help with some of the power tools because there was a lot of power tool action going on, and our kids could not do that. And his name was Alec. And Alec was preparing his boat for the upcoming race, and he had created sort of a geodesic dome kind of thing made out of PVC pipes, and his plan was to cover it with clear plastic wrapping and then walk like a hamster in a wheel in the water, and it would float. And you looked at it and you think, what? And he's explaining how it works, and Jim Conroy, our Broad Fruffman, is looking at the thing, and he says, okay, rule number 1, Alec is crazy. I mean, it really is like, what is this thing? I mean, you just didn't think it was going to work. And so this Alec is crazy comment lived in there for a while because it was funny. You as the audience so wondering, how could this possibly work? And like, don't do that. That's dangerous. And so ultimately we pulled it out because we did not want to make that comment about, a kid's invention and something that he was quite earnest about. And it wasn't crazy. It was a really cool invention, but it was really funny, and it was really, really funny. Anyone, whenever we watched it in edit, we would just fall down laughing every time we'd hear it because he just had such the perfect delivery, but we pulled it. And there were a lot of those moments that we had to pull for that reason. It made us laugh, and it made, if I'd shown it to you, you guys would probably laugh, but it just felt like it was not right for our audience. But those were incredibly subjective calls that we were making over and over and over. And I tended to be a little more conservative. Shockingly, our executive producer was a little more liberal about it. So I was like, okay, let's do it. So we'll see how that goes. Yes.
How did you make the jump to television? I mean, it seems like such an amazing, grabbing the wheel of your career, just lurching it out to the side.
Oh, well, I had done psych inpatient for a number of years, and across as I was going, I became a nurse manager ultimately. So I was running the inpatient unit, and so in that process, I had to learn how to manage people, and I also learned how to do budgets, which was, learning how to do a budget was an amazingly, incredibly important experience in my life, a big operating budget. In this case, it was for a unit in a hospital. And there was a point at which, actually it was, believe it or not, it was around the time of HMOs really taking over, and hospitals were being privatized and being taken over, and budgets were being cut, and in the process, I was put in a really difficult position where, as a nurse manager of a psych inpatient unit in a general hospital, I would have to be the supervisor on weekends of the entire hospital, which meant I had to deal with, the codes in the ER and the CCU and the ICU and just all the stuff. And I felt, it just really, I didn't feel like it was good care. I was not up to it. I had one area of expertise, and at the same time, I was, at that point in my early 30s, and I wanted to try another career, and it was sort of the close your eyes, hold your nose, and jump kind of thing, and so I quit, and I went to work at GBH, and as a supervisor in the audience services department, which is you answer viewer questions. That was it. And I had actually always been very interested in television, but but it never had pursued it and really didn't know what it meant. And then I began to work through, sort of just through the departments at GBH, always starting out, always in the business area. So I went from being what's called a unit manager, where you pay the bills, and learned my way through. And to the point where I was given a producer job, and then now the senior producer job. But I'm very glad. A lot of people haven't taken it through the business production management area way. They haven't gone in that way. They've gone in as PAs and associate producers, and always doing the creative, always doing editorial, and I didn't. And because of that, because of having so much budget and management, like how do you manage a big production when you have, $6 or $8 or $10 million to spend, and you have to figure it out. You have to map out the entire thing. How many producers, how many. That I was trained in that for so many years that that came kind of naturally to me, and so I've never lost that, and I actually value it so highly that I can still think that way, because part of running a TV show is all that stuff too. It's not just. It's just not the creative, fun stuff. It's also the tough stuff about, how to manage your money in a way that's really cost effective and gives you the best product. That's in a nutshell how I did it. But I'm totally glad I did it. I love this career. I've been doing this for, I don't know, almost 20 years now. Yes. Oh.
So back to the television show.
Mhm.
When you were coming up with educational content, how did you structure it? Like, did you go off of state standards?
Well, we start out with state standards. We know what the state standards are. And then we take it a step further and then sort of define our themes. And in the case of our first season, our themes were animals and their habitat, space science, and building things, so structures, sort of. Those were the three, kind of engineering and structures. Those were the three sort of ways in which we wanted to think about how to frame some of our challenges. And then we also had approaches, production approaches. We wanted to model habits of mind, the kinds of thinking that we wanted to model for our audience that were so that the kids could talk through their thinking process, articulate what it is, why it is what they're doing. We also want to model curiosity and asking questions and investigation. And so that's kind of the basic framework from which we operate. But at the same time, then we have these I spent 2 hours in a very big brainstorming meeting today with our new themes for season 2, trying to come up with ideas for, our themes for season 2 are earth science, which is really tough. I think the human body, which is really exciting because we want to focus on nutrition. Like a challenge we discussed today was the kids going into a school cafeteria and evaluating the nutrition of the lunch, and then coming up with their own menu that was going to meet with our new food pyramid, though no one really understands the food pyramid at this moment in our group. We're trying to figure that out. And what's our third theme? Forces in motion. It's sort of just, I'm not sure how that's going to take shape yet. And so we have these themes, and then we just say, well, what about this and what about that? And we know we're going to travel a little bit this year. We're hoping to go to Colorado. We talked about, things for, like someone said, well, maybe we should pan for gold. That would be really cool, pan for gold. And I'm like, well, first of all, how do you make a challenge out of panning for gold? How do you make it interesting to pan for gold? We have a lot of, airtime we have to fill here. So that we have to look at every single challenge idea that we come up with a lot of different lenses. How can we achieve this? How do we make an interesting TV show? How do we hit our curriculum goals? How do we make it visual? How do you tell it? Because you don't want this audience to be bored by the story. And then, how do you weave it into Ruff's world? How do you make it something that relates to Ruff, something that's going on with Ruff in his experience? And so that's sort of how we approach it.
Did you get a bigger budget since you're traveling?
We got a little bit bigger budget, but I think we just got a bigger budget, enough to just make it tolerable for everybody to do the job. Because I think I would have lost most of my staff if we hadn't, because people had to work such insane hours. And so the bigger budget is just to get enough PAs to do some of the, the grunt work that, I would be in the office each night photocopying scripts myself because there was no one else to do it. And so we just needed more people, and we now will hopefully, we don't even have our funding yet. All this, we're actually casting right now for a series which PBS has greenlit because PBS likes the show, but we do not have our funding yet in place. We don't have an approved budget from PBS. We have not heard back from the NSF yet, although the proposal's in, the panel's met. We supposedly did well on the panel, but we're waiting to hear whether we got the funding and did we get what we asked for. So we are still but because we know how compressed our timeline is, we have to cast as if we do have a TV show. So hopefully there will be a show and more money. But maybe we won't. I don't know. I'm not sure.
Like when you're planning these things out and having like internal brainstorms and discussions, like
Mm-hmm.
how much do you guys discuss about like from the audience perspective, like their participation in the whole process, like opportunities maybe after the show for them to continue in things or what they're going to be thinking, like.
Well, at the point at which we're brainstorming ideas, it really is specifically for the TV show. We aren't thinking. I mean, what I think about a lot is this interesting for a kid? Have you guys ever seen MythBusters? The show MythBusters. I really like MythBusters. I think it's a really fun show, and we were talking today about sort of myth-busting kid ideas, like, that if you drink, how to get rid of hiccups and are yawns contagious, and, funny little things that are part of a kid's world and that kids are learning about the world. And so I'm thinking about what is interesting to a kid in terms of watching the show. At the same time, part of our brainstorming group are our web team and our outreach team. And it's the outreach team that's thinking about how do we take the content that's being developed for the show and then take it further so that it can be brought into not the classroom, because in fact our mandate as part of our National Science Foundation funding is that we're part of the informal science division. So we are reaching kids in places that are not school, whether it be museums, libraries, after-school clubs, after-school programs, boys and girls clubs, those kinds of areas. So our outreach teams are thinking about how to take our content and then extend it into these areas. And the web team, same thing. They're thinking how do you take these themes of animals and their habitats and space science and create games and engaging science activities on the web that are going to extend learning for the kids. So that's how we think about it. We sort of separate out our activities, because if my team had to think all the way through, I think we have to start somewhere and start with the idea for the show, and then the other divisions take over and extend the content. So that's how we approach it. I don't know how other people do it. So I can show you some more video if you'd like, ask more questions. I think
Actually, we are now more or less.
Oh, okay, great. I can sing and dance. I can.
Unless you've got a really good final clip, we're down to 4 minutes in our normal.
I don't have I just have pieces of clips, so
Okay,
it's.
why don't we? That's good. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
And as is our wont, we will